Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Monday Q&A. So let's get this done, and I apologize for how late these are coming out. I was too tired to shoot them last night like I normally do, and it is really late in the morning. It's like after 10 a.m. already shooting these, so I'm not going to be up for a while. Alright, first question. If dietary fat is more easily stored as body fat, assuming the same caloric surplus, if I'm gaining 2 pounds per month, will more of that be fat rather than muscle if I eat, say, 80 grams of fat a day as opposed to 50 grams? Look, when you're having differences that small, it's probably not going to matter. Those are both still low-fat diets. And on top of that, you're not going to be able to gain 2 pounds of muscle per month unless you're a rank novice or someone who's more advanced. If you're gaining 2 pounds per month, the majority of that is going to be body fat. More advanced lifters rarely gain more than half a pound of muscle per month. So 2 pounds, it's going to be fat irrespective. And either way, you're giving your body 50 to 80 grams of dietary fat that they could use towards body fat storage every day. And in fact, on that low of dietary fat, you may struggle to even put on 2 pounds of per month, other than the initial transient changes in water weight. Because surplus carb, you don't gain the same weight on the same surplus with dramatically different carbs versus fat. Once muscle glucose is stabilized and at a stable level, you'll gain more water weight on the higher carbs, you'll gain more fat on the higher fat, but you're not gaining more tissue weight. So once those transient storage factors have stabilized, the actual scale weight's going to go up because the size of the surplus itself will be smaller due to the body burning off surplus carbs as heat easier. You're not going to see very much de novo lipogenesis. So that's where it gets tricky, because it becomes an issue of, even as carbs go higher and total calories go higher, your actual size of your true surplus doesn't always go higher, at least at a dramatic rate. But to answer your question more simply, yes, you possibly could gain slightly more body fat on the 80 grams versus the 50 grams on a bulk. But it's going to depend on a number of factors as to whether you do or not. So it's not something that can be answered that easily without sitting down with a person and looking at their individual math and tracking it and figuring it out. You're asking a very complex question. But the potential answer is yes, but there's absolutely no way it's going to be less with the higher fat. But it could be the same in many circumstances. All right, next question. What's your opinion on Dwayne The Rock Johnson claiming he doesn't take steroids? My opinion is that he is a smart man just to do that. And people think that I'm the ultimate anti-filth. Yes, I'm only against the people doing this who are basically conning people into buying your products, your services, your mentoring, your coaching, your nutrition programs, your diets, and the supplements that you recommend based upon the fake natty thing. That's my concern. I don't care about it outside of that. Now, very obviously, there are tons of actors, athletes, and everyone else who lie about it. The difference is they have to, particularly in the U.S. If Dwayne Johnson were to just come out and admit it, you've got the social aspects of maybe it would encourage a lot more younger children and teenagers to use it that he's probably concerned about and the media would be concerned about, and then you would have the media slaughter of him. It would be devastating to his career. It would cost him millions and millions of dollars to get up and admit he's doing something that's illegal in his country. So for him to actually deny it directly when asked in his situation, given how massive of a figure he is and how much money is involved, as opposed to these smaller scale people who could just deny it and they would still be okay for their sponsorships without actually even answering the question. They could basically just dodge the question and avoid it, like people like Kai Green do. But for someone like Dwayne Johnson, he can't do that. He actually has to lie about it. And I think in his case, it's smart to do so, even though all of us who know anything know it's not possible that he's natural. It's not even possible. It's not conceivable. It is very intelligent of him to just say, no, I don't use anything. It's smart. All right, next question. Is there any benefit or drawback to micro-loading 0.25 to 1 pound jumps versus the larger 5 to 10 pound jumps when focusing on hypertrophy? Would that simply delay the adaptation response? No, because you're still seeing progressive overload over time. The thing you have to remember, people really get too hung up in how much muscle growth they stimulate in a single session and how that translates into anything other than when you're a ranked novice and you're gaining muscle literally on a weekly basis. It's measurable on a scale. Once you're through that little early honeymoon phase, it doesn't work that way. Your individual training sessions aren't that critical. As long as you're keeping muscle protein synthesis up enough, you're getting enough workload, you're growing. It doesn't have to be a 5 pounds added to your work sets to stimulate new growth. In fact, you can get several workouts with the same weight and still stimulate new growth. It's just at a certain point it's going to stop. But it's very small amounts of growth. So the little micro loading just keeps that progressive pattern going. It won't give you any less gains. And the upside is that it will take you longer to stall, versus if you're making bigger jumps, you're here and then you make a big jump, you may jump and then stall for a while. It can be more difficult depending on what sort of periodization you're using. If you're trying to do some sort of straight, just linear type progress with stalls and you're making bigger jumps, if you're not a novice, it's not going to work because you're going to stall way too often. Unless you're doing the method of where it's something like when you get to higher reps and you're able to push out so many reps with like RPE 8 or 9, and then you add 5 or 10 pounds and drop the reps back down, you could get away with it that way. But otherwise you're going to stall much, much faster. So there are pros and cons of doing it both ways, but both ways in the grand scheme of things for hypertrophy are probably capable of producing about the same results. I doubt you're going to see a difference in that, but it will make a difference in terms of how frequently you're stalling with a given weight. All right, next question. How to improve the middle of the lift in a bench press? I usually touch the bar with my chest and rest for 1 second so I don't bounce the bar, which is good. I recommend pause benching. The lift off and lockout go well, but the middle of the lift just lags. Today my spotter had to assist me only for about half an inch in the middle. He said he let go because he could see I had it. Don't use spotters unless you have to. Tell your spotters to not touch the bar unless they have to. But the thing is, if your spotter had to touch the bar, assume he jerked a big chunk of weight off there. Because even if a spotter grabs and just pulls lightly, for someone, a grown man, to pull 20 or 25 pounds on a bar of force, they could do while thinking they're just barely touching it with their fingers. That is such a small amount of weight. You could lift 20 pounds with one finger, or the 2 fingers, easily without even realizing it, on the extra weight. So he helped you probably dramatically. And spotters tend to do that all you, bro. It's just something about gym culture that causes that. They take more weight and assist you more than you realize. But the fact that he had to touch it in the middle doesn't mean the middle is your sticking point. It means you're weak off the chest. And you know what? If you improve that sticking point through whatever means, it still may not give you a better bench because you still aren't necessarily stronger. If you're sticking in the middle, and most people who think the middle, they think it's up here when it's really down here. It's about 4 or 5 inches off your chest most of the time. And in reality, that means you're still weak off the chest, which is where you should be as a raw bencher. And that means you just have to get stronger. It doesn't mean that you have a weak point, because that is the actual natural, normal stalling spot for the majority of raw lifters when they're using a weight that they're almost strong enough to lift, but not quite. When you're in that situation, you usually do get it started off the chest. You just don't get it started fast enough off the chest to drive it through. And it stalls right there in the middle, or a few inches off the chest, 5 or 6 inches. And that's what happens. So you need to just get stronger. And you need to reassess why you're missing lifts at all. What's going on in your training to where you are hitting those stalls and missing lifts that a spotter has to help you on. Because that's also part of your problem. You're missing lifts in training. All right, next question. On the 8th day, God made slow cookers. And what's your favorite slow cooker recipe for mad recovery gains? Honestly, since going vegetarian, I don't really use a slow cooker anymore. I find the slow cooker is really good for meat dishes. That's what I always use them for. I find things like any combination that involves, usually like any sort of beef that has a high connective tissue content, slow cooking is great for, because it breaks down all the connective tissue, turns it into gelatin, and it makes tougher meats much softer. So you're basically stewing the meat, combined with like potatoes, carrots, things like that, or even chicken and rice. You do the same thing with chicken breast. People keep chicken and turkey breast really juicy by cooking them in juices in a slow cooker for 4 to 8 hours. And then once they've started cooking partially in there, they add their rice and other stuff, or again, potatoes, carrots, things like that. Tubers of any type in rice combined with any sort of meat that you need to keep wet or break down connective tissue are your best recipes, and just season them to taste. It's hard to mess those up once you've experimented at all. They usually taste great. But I don't really have a need for that anymore. All right, next question. Jason, what should I do about muscle imbalances? My whole left side is bigger than my right side. Not really that much stronger, but noticeably bigger in size. What do you suggest? I already do dumbbell work, but have been doing that for some time, but doesn't seem to work. The reason it doesn't work is because that's a terrible approach to fixing imbalances, and I know people who are convinced that it has to work, but they don't understand biomechanics if they think that that's going to fix a left to right imbalance. It might on something like a concentration curl, but it's certainly not going to help on any of the big movements. Okay, part of the problem is that oftentimes your imbalances are in your mind. I would say well over 50% of people, the muscle imbalances are in their head. They think they have a muscle imbalance that nobody else but them sees, and if you were to measure it, it literally might be an eighth or a 16th of an inch difference in their arms, but they're convinced it's a half an inch or an inch, when it really isn't. It's not even visible to other people the majority of the time. And if anything, it's just a different distribution of body fat on one side versus the other. And once someone gets leaner, you can't even see that imbalance anymore. As opposed to someone like me who has a true imbalance as a result of a major bicep rupture that had to be reconnected and then got infected afterwards and caused me other problems and complications. I have an imbalance that probably isn't solvable. I doubt you have that imbalance, given that the strength is virtually the same. If there was a half-inch difference in your biceps, you wouldn't be able to curl the same weight for even close to the same reps for the concentration curl on each side. The same thing on chest flies. One side would give out quite a bit sooner than the other if there was any significant difference in development. But to fix imbalances, the things that cause imbalances are just as easy to replicate with dumbbells as they are with barbells. It's called bad form. If you learn to keep yourself locked in and keep everything even, same thing whether you're doing a barbell press or a row or anything else, as long as you're not getting uneven and you focus on moving the bar smoothly and both ends of the bar traveling through the same bar path without leading with one side, by practicing it with lighter weight and learning to lift correctly and getting set up tight and correct, you can avoid having uneven development from the barbell. Because the thing is, if you're doing it with the barbell, odds are you will do the exact same thing with a dumbbell. And even though you have the ability to pull both sides if you were locked in like a machine maybe, most people don't. Most people, even when they get on machines to fix those imbalances and it gets heavy, they shift. You see them shift a little bit to one side or another. Well, that's what creates the imbalance. They have one side and they're shifting around a little bit. Unevenness is taking a heavier load than the other and working harder. That is what causes the potential imbalances if they do that long enough over time. You can actually have the exact same problems with a barbell, a dumbbell, and a machine. So the solution is cleaning up your technique and what you're doing, particularly on those reps you're grinding when it gets real heavy. That's what causes the imbalances. All right, next question. Jason, I ran a cut for 4 months. I lost 12 kilograms. So that's what, 3 kilos per month? That's pretty fast. I can see that being a little fast for anyone who's not at a higher body fat. My weight on the bar almost didn't decrease, but I feel like I lost a good amount of muscle. My question is, can you keep your strength on a cut and lose muscle? Probably not. To be honest, it's, again, also in your head. As we lose weight, we feel like we're losing muscle. It's psychological because our measurements all go down, our clothes fit looser. In some cases, we might look bigger due to the definition, but we feel smaller because we are smaller. We lose intramuscular fat, not just subcutaneous fat. So everything feels smaller. The clothing feels smaller. We weigh less. It's psychological in our heads because most people who train really seriously oftentimes have body image disorders to some extent. And since we feel smaller, we look smaller in the mirror. If you maintained your strength during a cut, If you maintained all your strength, I would say you probably didn't lose any muscle. If you lost just a little bit of strength, you maybe lost a little bit of muscle, but you may not have lost enough to where you won't regain it within a few weeks when you return back to even maintenance calories. Once you get a little bit of rebound afterwards and a little bit of the muscle memory kicks back in. As long as you're maintaining strength, the odds that you've lost any significant amount of muscle mass is very, very low. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.